There is a particular kind of tiredness that does not want anything new. It has had enough of the day and its surprises, and what it reaches for is a room it already knows by heart. For a certain listener, that room is the Mystery Shack. You do not need to watch to know the shape of it, the crooked sign, the tourist traps, the two children who are certain the world is stranger than the adults will admit. The voices arrive before the pictures do. Grunkle Stan grumbling about the register, Mabel laughing at something only she finds funny, Dipper narrating his own worry. When a story is familiar enough, you can let go of following it and simply rest inside it, half awake, held by a place that cannot startle you because you have already been everywhere it goes. Tonight moves toward the parts of that place most people keep at arm's length. Across the next 2 hours, this is a slow walk through the episodes of Gravity Falls that reach past mystery and into fear, the melting figures and missing heads, the small town that keeps its worst secrets behind the wallpaper. The comfort is not in avoiding the dark. It is in knowing the dark so well that it can carry you to sleep. Welcome to Pine Hat. Settle in wherever you are. Turn the lights low, let the pillow take the weight of your head, and let the sound of this town do the rest. There is nothing you need to remember, and nothing you need to solve. Think about that door Soos finds hidden behind the peeling paper, and the forgotten room waiting on the other side, and how a story you have heard before can still hold a single quiet surprise. You are not here to stay awake for it. You are here to drift, slowly, while it unfolds without you. Consider what a wax figure actually is. It is a human shape without a human inside it, a face built to be looked at and never to look back, a body that holds a pose because it cannot do anything else. There is a reason museums of wax have always sat close to the language of horror, and Gravity Falls understood this instinct early. In its third episode, the show reaches behind the wallpaper of the Mystery Shack and finds exactly the room a horror story would hide there. Soos is the one who finds it. A secret door, papered over and forgotten, opens onto a room nobody had spoken of, and inside that room stands Stan's old collection of wax figures, a small silent population that has been waiting in the dark. What makes this discovery unsettling is not that the figures are monstrous. They are not at first. They are ordinary. They are the kind of thing a roadside tourist trap would keep, historical faces and famous shapes molded in wax, the sort of display a child would walk past without a second look. And that ordinariness is the trap the episode is setting. The episode is teaching you to think of these things as furniture, as scenery, as background, so that when they stop being background, you will feel it as a violation. This is a deliberate piece of construction. A story that wants to frighten you with a familiar object first has to make the object feel safe. The first sign that something is wrong is quiet, almost tender. The wax figure of Abraham Lincoln, which the episode establishes as Stan's favorite in the whole collection, is found melted. Think about the choice of image. Not smashed, not stolen, but melted. Reduced to a slumping ruin of what it was. Melting is what wax does when it is left too long in the heat, so at a glance this reads as an accident, an act of weather rather than an act of will. The show gives you a crime that could be explained away as nothing at all, and it lets the loss land on the one figure Stan actually cared about. Before there is any mystery, there is grief, and the grief is aimed with precision. Around this loss, the ordinary life of the shack keeps moving. Mabel, wanting to be part of the museum's grand reopening, sculpts a new wax figure of her own, a wax stand to add to the display. It is an act of affection and craft, a child making a likeness of the man she lives with, and the episode presents it exactly that way, warm and slightly silly. You are not meant to read menace into it. You are meant to like it, which is why the next beat works as well as it does. The wax stand is found decapitated. The head is gone. A figure Mabel built with her own hands, a double of her own uncle, is discovered ruined and headless before the museum can even open its doors. Here the episode crosses a line that a lot of children's programming would not go near. It stages the image of a beheading, and it stages it on a body that wears a familiar face. The horror is displaced onto wax, which is what lets the show get away with it, but the shape of the crime is the shape of a murder. A likeness of Stan has been executed in the night, and the head has been taken like a trophy. What happens next is, in its own dry way, the sharpest joke the episode tells, and it is a joke about who protects a town like this. Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Durland arrive to look at the beheading. They are the law. They are the people you call when a thing like this happens, and they respond by declaring the case unsolvable, without conducting any real investigation at all. No search, no questions, no effort. They simply pronounce the mystery beyond solving and withdraw. The episode is doing two things at once here. It is being funny, in the deadpan register it favors, and it is clearing the board, removing the adults who are supposed to handle danger so that the danger becomes the children's problem. A whodunit only works if the competent authority is absent, and Gravity Falls makes that absence a character trait rather than a coincidence. So Dipper takes it up, and this is where the episode reveals what it truly is. He builds a suspect board. He gathers photographs and pins them and draws the connections. The visual grammar of every detective story ever filmed, imported wholesale into a summer cartoon. Among the faces he pins are Robbie and a handful of other town regulars, ordinary residents pulled into the frame of suspicion. The board is played partly for comedy, a child aping the seriousness of a homicide detective, but the mechanics underneath it are entirely sincere. There is a crime, there is a scene, there are suspects, and there is a boy trying to reason his way from evidence to answer. The show is not parodying the whodunit. It is running one, in earnest, inside a setting nobody expected to hold one. The breakthrough comes, as it should, from a detail that was there the whole time. Dipper notices a hole in the wax stand figure's shoe, and he notices that it matches the prints left at the scene. This is the classic movement of detection, the moment when a physical trace connects the crime to a body. He believes, for a heartbeat, that he has found the culprit's footprint, and then Mabel undoes his certainty in the most quietly frightening way the episode has. Every wax figure has that hole, she tells him. It is how each one is mounted on its display stand. The hole is not a clue pointing at one suspect. It is a feature shared by all of them. The prints at the scene were left by wax feet. Sit with what that reversal does. The evidence does not narrow the field of suspects. It widens it to include the entire silent population of the room, the figures you were taught in the first act to treat as harmless scenery. The culprits are the wax figures themselves. The bodies in the display cases are the killers. This is a genuine whodunit solution, arrived at through a matched print and a fact about how the objects are built, and it turns the museum from a crime scene into a nest of them. The reason the series gives for their crimes is the part that lingers. The wax figures come to life whenever the moon is waxing, and they attack Stan in revenge. Revenge for locking them away. Revenge for forgetting them for 10 years. There is a cruel pun buried in the mechanism, the waxing moon animating the wax, but underneath the wordplay is something close to sorrow. These are things that were made to be looked at and then were shut in the dark and left, and their fury is the fury of the abandoned. The horror of the uncanny double, the human shape that moves when it should not, is fused here with a real and recognizable wound. To be forgotten by the person who made you your home is its own kind of violence, and the episode lets the monsters have that grievance without excusing what they do with it. And then the ending folds the whole thing back on itself. When the fatal blow finally comes for the real Stan, it is Mabel's wax figure, the double she sculpted with her own hands, that takes it for him. In truth, it only happens the once. In the dark of that storage room, the wax figures mistake the double for the real Stan, and the blow meant for him lands on the statue instead. The thing that opened the episode as a headless victim closes it by choosing to lose its head so the man it resembles can keep his. A likeness made out of love steps in front of the killing meant for the person it was made to honor. In a room full of the forgotten taking revenge, the one figure that was remembered gives everything it has. There is an episode from early in the first season that begins with a lie so small it barely registers as one. Dipper, who is 12, tells Wendy that he is 13. He does this for a reason that anyone who has ever been the youngest person in a room will recognize immediately. Wendy has older friends, teenagers, and the difference between 12 and 13 is the difference between being asked along and being left behind. So he adds a single year to himself, and with that year he buys an evening he is not old enough to have. The episode is built on that arithmetic, and it will spend its whole runtime collecting the debt. The outing takes the group to a place called Dusk to Dawn, an abandoned convenience store that the town says is haunted. This is the setting the show has chosen, and the choice matters. A convenience store is the most ordinary building in America. It is fluorescent light and tile floors, cereal boxes and an arcade cabinet, the candy rack by the register. Nothing about it is frightening. That is precisely why the episode wants it. Horror likes to take the familiar and turn it slightly, and there is nothing more familiar, more comfortably American than the little roadside store where you buy a soda on a summer night. The show sets its trap inside that comfort. This is also the episode where Wendy's friends first appear as a group, and it is worth pausing on them because they are the reason everything happens. Robbie, Nate, Lee, Thompson, and Tambry. Until now, Wendy has been a single figure, the cool older employee at the Mystery Shack. Here she arrives with a whole social world attached, and Dipper steps into it as the smallest and youngest, carrying his borrowed year like a coat that does not fit. The group is not cruel to him. They simply are what they are, teenagers, and being a teenager in this store turns out to be a capital offense. The haunting has a source, and the episode gives it to us plainly. The ghosts are Ma and Pa Duskerton, the elderly couple who once owned and ran the store. Their deaths are the hinge of the entire episode, and the manner of them is where the small-town comedy curdles into something colder. The Duskertons banned teenagers from their store. The teenagers retaliated by blasting loud rap music at them, and the two old people died at the same moment of simultaneous heart attacks. Think about what that means as a piece of storytelling. This is not a monster from a swamp or a curse from an old book. This is a generational grievance. An old couple frightened to death by the young, and now returned to do to the young what the young did to them. The slasher villain here is not a masked stranger. It is the aggrieved past itself, wearing the aprons of shopkeepers. And the punishments they invent are the store-made cruel. The Duskertons do not simply attack the teenagers. They pull them into the products on the shelves, which is a far stranger and more unsettling idea. Lee is dragged onto the artwork of a cereal box and chased through it by a mascot in the manner of Toucan Sam, the friendly cartoon bird turned predator. Thompson is forced into the arcade dance game and made to dance for his life. The harmless attraction by the door, now a machine that means to kill him. Nate is transformed into a hot dog. Each of these is a joke and a threat at once, and the doubleness is the point. The ordinary objects of the store, the ones designed to be bright and appealing and safe for children, become the instruments of the trap. Americana does not just decorate this episode. It is the weapon. The ghosts go further still. At one point they possess Mabel, taking her body and using it against the others, and this is the story reminding us that the danger is not contained to strangers. The people you came in with can be turned. It is a slasher move, the ally who becomes the threat, and the episode reaches for it without hesitation even inside a story aimed at children. Then there is Mabel's own thread, which runs alongside the horror like a fever. On the shelves, she finds a candy called Smile Dip, a product that has been banned and discontinued, and she eats a large amount of it. What follows is one of the most talked about sequences the show ever produced, and other tellings have treated it as a standalone piece of surrealism, the trippy interlude. The animation team let off the leash. I want to frame it differently. As part of the same idea, the rest of the episode is working. Mabel finds a forbidden product on the shelf of a store that kills people for their appetites, and she consumes it, and it consumes her back. The hallucination gives her a flying dolphin with 4 arms and 2 mouths, and the candy's own mascots, the Flavor Pups, come alive around her. It is presented as a comic freakout, and it is very funny. But underneath the color, it is the same machinery as Lee in the cereal box and Thompson at the arcade. The product reaches out and pulls the child inside itself. Mabel simply walked into that trap willingly, holding the candy, smiling. The store does not even have to work for her. What makes the episode close rather than simply end is Dipper, and the way he closes it returns us to the lie he told at the start. He is the one who works out what the ghosts actually want. He deduces that the Duskertons are enraged by one thing specifically, teenage behavior, that their fury is not general but aimed, pointed at a single stage of life. And once he understands that, the solution is not a weapon or an escape. It is a confession. Dipper stops the haunting by admitting the truth he spent the whole evening hiding, that he is 12, that he is not a teenager at all. The thing that saves him is the very fact he lied about to get in the door. Sit with the shape of that for a moment, because it is more elegant than the episode lets on. Dipper adds a year to himself to be included, and that borrowed year is exactly what marks him for the trap, because the trap is set for teenagers and he has just claimed to be one. His safety was never in the lie, it was in the truth he gave away for an evening of belonging. To survive, he has to give back the year, to shrink himself again to 12 in front of the older friends he wanted so badly to impress. The store demands honesty about age as the price of leaving, and it is the honesty that the whole night was arranged to avoid. There is something almost gentle underneath the horror of it, and that gentleness is easy to miss when the surface is a two-mouthed dolphin and a boy chased by a cereal mascot. The episode takes the smallest and most human lie, the fudged birthday, the extra year, and it builds a house of ghosts around it. And then it makes the way out of that house the simple act of telling the truth about who you are. Ma and Pa Duskerton died guarding their store against the young, and they cannot tell the difference between a child and a teenager until the child says so out loud. Dipper says so. He steps out of the borrowed year, and the store, having gotten the confession it was owed, lets him go. There is a holiday in Gravity Falls that does not exist anywhere else, and the series introduces it in Season 1 as though everyone in town has always known it. Summerween is the town's own version of Halloween, only celebrated in the summer, and the writers commit to the joke completely. There are carved Jack-o-Melons where there ought to be Jack-o'-lanterns, and there is trick-or-treating through the streets exactly as you would expect, only under warm evening light instead of the cold October dark. Dipper and Mabel are excited to go, and their excitement is the ordinary excitement of children who still believe a night of collecting candy is worth doing. That is the emotional ground the episode stands on before it decides to frighten you. The horror, when it arrives, grows directly out of the candy, which is the detail that makes the whole thing work. Consider first what happens to Dipper's excitement, because the monster is built to punish it. Wendy tells him, in effect, that trick-or-treating is for kids, and that single remark changes his outlook on the entire evening. He is old enough now to feel embarrassed by a thing he loved an hour ago. The episode treats that embarrassment as the real vulnerability, the soft place the story presses on. And then, earlier in the night, Dipper accidentally insults a monster, and the monster responds by forcing him into a bargain. He must fulfill its candy quota by the end of the night or be eaten. Notice how deliberately that threat is aimed. It is not random. It attaches itself precisely to the boy who has just decided he is too grown up for candy, and it demands he collect candy anyway, on pain of death. The creature that delivers this threat has two forms, and the distance between them is where the craft lives. The first form is a disguise, and it is a good one. A tall figure stands in a patchwork coat and a pointed hat, with a yellow smiling mask over its face, something between a jack-o'-lantern and a simple happy face. The overall shape reads as a scarecrow, and that reading is deliberate. A scarecrow is already an uncanny object, a thing made to look human enough to fool birds and never human enough to fool us. A figure that stands in a field at dusk with a painted grin. The trickster borrows that silhouette because it arrives preloaded with unease. You have seen this shape before in 100 harvest season nightmares, and the episode is counting on that memory. Then the disguise comes away, and the true body underneath is the part worth slowing down for. Beneath the coat and the mask there is no flesh at all. The trickster is an amorphous purple mass, and the mass is made entirely of candy. This is the central idea of the design, and it is a genuinely strange one. Most monsters are made of the things we already fear touching: teeth and claws and wet dark tissue. This one is made of the things we buy for children. The horror is assembled from the treat, not opposed to it, and that inversion is what gives the creature its particular flavor. You are looking at a pile of sweets that has decided to want something. Look closer at the face, because the face is composed rather than grown. The eyes are two mints. The eyebrows are rolled candies laid above them. The mouth is outlined in licorice, drawn on like a line of dark rope, and inside that mouth the teeth are candy corn. Every feature is a specific piece of confectionery placed where a feature should go, and the effect is that of a face improvised out of whatever was in the bowl. This is closer to the logic of a collage than the logic of anatomy. A child could assemble this face on a plate. That is exactly why it disturbs, because it takes the small, harmless act of making a candy face and animates it, gives it eyes that track you and a mouth that opens. Now consider what the body is actually built from, because the writers were specific, and the specificity is the whole point. The trickster is made of loser candy, black licorice, saltwater taffy, stale and waxy chocolate, and candy corn. The leftover pieces that children pick out of the pile and set aside. These are the treats nobody wants, the ones that sit at the bottom of the bag until they are thrown away. The monster is a body assembled from rejection, and it seeks revenge for that rejection. Sit with that for a moment. The creature is not hungry in the ordinary sense. It is aggrieved. It has been discarded, over and over, by children exactly like the ones it now hunts, and it has gathered all that discarded sweetness into a single purple shape that wants to be eaten, or wants to eat, and can no longer tell the difference. This is a more sophisticated piece of monster writing than the surface gag suggests. The candy body is funny, and the episode knows it is funny, but the funniness is load-bearing. A creature made of the candy children reject is a creature built out of the same judgment Wendy just handed Dipper. He has been told he is too old for this. The candy has been told it is not good enough for this. Both have been sorted into the pile of things nobody wants, and the episode quietly rhymes them. The boy who fears he has aged out of the treat is being chased by the treat that got left behind. I do not think the episode underlines this connection, and it is stronger for leaving it unspoken. But the connection is there in the design if you go looking. The body horror comes not only from what the trickster is made of, but from what that material lets it do. Because it is an amorphous mass rather than a fixed anatomy, it is not bound to the 2 arms a body is supposed to have. It can sprout an extra pair, and it extends them to seize its victims. This is the moment the candy stops being whimsical. A shape that can grow new limbs whenever it needs them is a shape with no reliable outline, and a pursuer with no reliable outline is far harder to escape than one you can see coming. You cannot count its arms. You cannot predict where the next one comes from. The children are hunted through the woods by a thing that reaches for them from more directions than a body should have, and the reaching is the horror made literal. Place this creature in its lineage for a moment. The creature feature has always loved the monster that should be harmless and is not. The blob that oozes, the thing that absorbs, the shape that keeps coming no matter what you do to it. A gelatinous mass that engulfs its prey is one of the oldest ideas in the genre, and the Summerween trickster is a candy-colored descendant of it. What the episode adds is the emotional specificity. The classic blob wants nothing in particular. It simply expands. This blob wants recognition. It is made of the sweetness that was deemed not sweet enough, and it will chase a child through the trees to be acknowledged. The old monster was appetite without motive. This one is motive first, a grievance that happens to have teeth of candy corn. What lingers, after the mask is off and the extra arms are out, is how completely the design turns the comforting into the threatening without ever leaving the world of the comforting. The night began with 2 children who wanted to collect candy. The monster is candy. The features of its face are candy. Its teeth are candy. Its reason for existing is candy that was thrown away. Everything about it is drawn from the exact pleasure the evening was supposed to be about, folded back on itself until the treat becomes the hunter. That is a difficult trick to pull off in an animated show meant for children, and the episode manages it by being precise about the material, by naming the black licorice and the stale chocolate and the candy corn out loud, so that the next time you find those pieces at the bottom of a bag, you might feel, very faintly, that they have been keeping count. The episode begins in the smallest possible register. Rain on the roof of the Mystery Shack, and Dipper and Mabel in the attic, playing a game together while the weather does what weather does. There is nothing cosmic here yet. There is only the ordinary texture of a wet afternoon, 2 children passing the time, and it matters that the story starts this low, because everything that follows will strain upward toward something the series has not attempted before. Stan calls them downstairs, not for any emergency, but to mock one of Gideon's commercials. That is the pivot from small to large, though no one in the room understands it that way. A television advertisement, watched to be laughed at, is the door through which the whole apocalypse of the episode walks in. The commercial itself carries the threat. Gideon reveals his plan on the air, plainly, the way a child announces an intention before he has the power to carry it out. He intends to demolish the Mystery Shack and replace it with his own attraction, a rival temple to wonder that he calls the Tent of Telepathy. Consider what that name promises. Not a house of oddities, not a roadside museum of taxidermy and lies, but a tent devoted to the reading of minds. The show is planting a flag early, telling you where its attention will settle, and the flag is planted on the interior of a person, on the thought that a mind might be a place someone could enter. Stan, who deals in the physical and the fraudulent, treats the threat as a matter of law and locks and property. He tells the children that Gideon can only seize the shack if he breaks in and opens the safe himself, and at the exact moment he finishes saying it, they hear the sound of Gideon doing precisely that. The comic timing is perfect, and underneath the comedy there is a small lesson about how this episode works. You say the danger out loud, and the danger answers. Naming a thing summons it. Stan does not know he is teaching that lesson, but the whole back half of the story will obey it. What happens next is entirely within Stan's world, the world of the body and the broom. He confronts Gideon, and when Gideon does not take him seriously at first, Stan hits him with a broom and chases him out of the shack. There is no magic in this. There is an old man and a household object, and a boy who overestimated himself, driven back into the rain. If the episode ended here, it would be a farce about a property dispute. But then, Stan does the thing that changes the genre. As he locks the deed inside the safe, he explains that the combination is safe, that it exists only in what he calls the one place Gideon cannot get to, which is his own mind. Sit with the confidence in that. Stan believes the mind is the last locked room, the vault behind every other vault, the single space that cannot be broken into because it has no door. For most of human storytelling, he would be right. The interior of a person has always been the one reliable fortress, the place you retreat to when everything outer is lost. The narrator's opinion, offered as opinion, is that this line is the true hinge of the episode, more than any monster or any spell. It states the assumption that the rest of the story exists to destroy. Stan says the mind cannot be reached, and the story leans in and asks quietly, "Are you certain?" Gideon, humiliated, standing outside in the weather, provides the answer. He glares through the shack window, and he pulls out Journal 2, and he mutters that Stan's mind is not, in his words, as safe as you might think. That sentence is the reply to Stan's boast, spoken through glass, and it turns the boast inside out. What Stan offered as his ultimate security, Gideon has just identified as the point of entry. The safest place becomes the target precisely because everyone assumes it is safe. And Gideon decides, on the strength of the journal in his hands, to unleash the dream demon, Bill Cipher. This is the moment the show reaches for a new mode. Until now, the mysteries of Gravity Falls have been strange, but they have been objects in the world, things you could photograph or run from or lock in a safe. A dream demon is not that. A dream demon lives on the far side of the one boundary Stan just declared uncrossable. By naming Bill as the tool of invasion, the episode announces that it is done treating the mind as a fortress and is about to treat it as a landscape, a place with weather and terrain, a place that can be entered by something that was never alive in the ordinary sense. The horror the episode is building is not the horror of being chased. It is the horror of being read, of being opened, of learning that the last locked room was never locked at all. The story does not rush toward that threshold. It lingers, and the lingering is deliberate, because comfort is being spent slowly on purpose. During movie night, the group is watching a Western, and Mabel suggests switching it to something called Dream Boy High, which everyone else refuses to watch. It is a small joke about taste and about a sister outvoted by a room, and yet the title she reaches for is telling. Dream Boy High. Even the throwaway gag orbits the word dream, as though the episode cannot stop circling the subject it is preparing to invade. A bat gets into the kitchen and terrifies Soos, and Stan sends a reluctant Dipper to deal with it, and Dipper ends up injured in the encounter. This is domestic chaos, the ordinary danger of a creature loose in a house, and it is the kind of danger this show knows how to survive. A bat can be swatted at. A bat can leave a mark and be forgotten. It belongs to the register the episode is about to leave behind. Soos, meanwhile, provides the note the whole story rests on without seeming to. He calls Stan's personality one of life's great mysteries, and having said it, he decides to investigate a mystery of his own, whether it is possible to lick your own elbow. Read that pairing slowly, because the episode has hidden its thesis inside a fool's errand. A person is a mystery, Soos observes, and then he goes off to test the limits of his own body, to discover whether he can reach a part of himself that seems, by design, unreachable. The elbow you cannot lick and the mind you cannot enter are the same joke told twice, once in the body and once in the soul. There is a part of every person that is supposedly beyond that person's own reach, and the episode is about to argue that beyond your reach does not mean beyond everyone's. And then the ritual. Gideon performs a summoning for Bill Cipher, and Bill agrees to invade Stan's mind, but the agreement comes at a price. In exchange for the invasion, Gideon must later help Bill with a favor, and the favor is left unspecified. That blankness is the most frightening thing in the whole sequence. A villain you can measure is a villain you can eventually defeat. But Bill asks for something without a shape, a debt with no number attached, a promise to be collected later on, terms not yet named. The narrator's view is that this unspecified favor is where the show's cosmic horror truly lives, more than in any triangle or any glowing eye. It is the recognition that the thing on the other side of the mind's wall does not want a house or a deed. It wants an opening, and it is patient, and it will decide the cost when the cost suits it. The children are not entirely blind to what is being set in motion. Mabel and Soos secretly witness the summoning ritual from behind a bush, and having seen it, they run back to warn Dipper. That image closes the setup with a small, human act of watching. Two of them crouched behind foliage, seeing a boy call something up out of a journal, and then running, because running to tell someone is what you do when you have seen a thing you cannot handle alone. They do not fully know what they saw. They know only that it was outside the ordinary, outside the register of bats and brooms and rival tourist traps, and that Dipper needs to hear about it before the night goes any further. So the episode has walked you, step by patient step, from rain on an attic roof to a bargain with a demon. It began by insisting the mind was a safe, and it ends its first half by proving that a safe is only a promise about a lock, and that some things do not need the lock at all. Everything is now in place. The boast has been made, the reply has been spoken through glass, the price has been agreed to in the dark, and the last locked room stands ready to be opened. Some horror has nothing to do with monsters and everything to do with enclosure. It is the horror of the sealed room, the place you enter of your own will and then cannot easily leave, where the walls hold their shape, but the meaning of everything inside them keeps sliding. Season 2 of Gravity Falls builds one of these places early, and although the episode is remembered mostly for the creature waiting at the end of it, the more unsettling work happens before the creature ever shows its true face. The bunker is the story. The thing living in it is only the last thing the bunker reveals. Consider how the group even finds it. Dipper shines a blacklight across a hidden page of Journal 3 and a map surfaces out of the blank paper, a route drawn in ink that only answers to the right light. The image is worth pausing on. The knowledge was always there, sitting in plain view, and it required a specific and unnatural way of seeing to become real. The journal does not simply contain secrets. It contains secrets that are conditional, that reward a certain kind of attention and stay invisible to any other. Before the children have taken a single step underground, the episode has already told you its governing rule. Nothing here is what it appears to be at first glance, and the surface is designed to mislead. The entrance itself has to be forced. Wendy swings an axe into a hidden switch, and the concealed door gives way, which is a small violent gesture that the show stages almost casually. It is worth sitting with the physicality of it. This is not a place you knock on. It is a place you break into, with a blade, because the person who built it did not intend for it to be opened by anyone who did not already know exactly where to strike. Every detail of the bunker's design assumes an intruder. The map hides. The door hides. The switch hides behind the wall as though the builder feared the world above and wanted a layer of stone and secrecy between himself and it. And once they are inside, the space begins to speak in the language of long dread. The group finds survival rations, and the rations are labeled to last until the year 2070. Let that number settle. Someone stocked this room against a future measured in decades, against a catastrophe patient enough that a person might need to eat down here for the better part of a human lifetime. That single label does more to establish fear than any creature could. It tells you that whoever made this place was not preparing for a bad night. He was preparing to disappear from the surface of the world and to keep on living, quietly, underneath it, for longer than most people expect to be alive at all. Then the paranoia turns from architecture into presence. Dipper finds a food can that has been recently opened, and the discovery changes the temperature of the whole bunker. Soos draws the natural conclusion, which is that the author of the journal, the mind behind all of this, might still be alive and might still be here. Notice how efficiently that reframes the room. A moment earlier, the bunker was a tomb, a museum of someone's fear. Now it is a home with the lights left on, and the group is not exploring an empty space. They are trespassing in an occupied one. An open can is a small ordinary object. In a sealed underground shelter that no one was supposed to find, it becomes evidence of a watcher. A heartbeat somewhere in the dark that has been going about its business while these children wandered in. The claustrophobia deepens because the bunker keeps folding inward. Wendy finds a hidden passage concealed behind a large wall map of Gravity Falls, and the geography of the place turns recursive. A map of the town, hung on the wall of a room hidden under the town, hiding yet another way down. You go into the secret, and the secret opens onto a further secret, and the sense of depth becomes psychological rather than merely spatial. There is no single floor to reach and stand on. Each layer promises that this is the bottom and then reveals another door. That structure is quietly suffocating in a way the show never has to underline. The deeper the group goes, the further they are from the axe and the switch and the daylight above. And it is here, in that tightening space, that the bunker turns from passive to hostile. Mabel accidentally shoves Dipper onto a floor button, and the security system wakes up. The trap that follows is one of the cruelest small ideas the series ever built. The floor tiles begin to expand inward, closing toward the center, arranged to crush anyone standing on the marked tile at the middle of the room. The threat is not a beast with teeth, it is the room itself deciding to become smaller until there is no room left. Think about that as an expression of pure claustrophobic panic. The walls and floor converging on a single point. The space you are trapped in physically shrinking around your body. The bunker was always closing in as a feeling. Now it does so as a machine. The escape is telling, and it belongs to the same logic as the blacklight map at the very start. The group survives by pressing 4 specific marked tiles in the right places to open a door. The way out is not force this time. It is knowledge, the correct reading of a hidden pattern, the same demand the journal made when it hid its map in invisible ink. The bunker will kill you if you treat it as an ordinary room, and it will let you pass only if you understand that it is a puzzle built by a careful and frightened mind. Everything down here tests whether you can see what is really in front of you, and the trap simply raises the stakes of failing that test to the level of your life. All of this pressure, all of this accumulated paranoia about a watcher in the dark and secrets behind secrets, resolves into a single figure. The group meets a mysterious old man who claims to be the author of Journal 3. The credits name him only as the mysterious old man, and he is voiced by Mark Hamill, an actor who knows precisely how to make a soft voice feel like it is hiding a second one underneath. And for a moment, the bunker seems to deliver on its long promise. The opened can, the rations meant to last decades, the hidden passages, all of it points to a living author. And here he is, an old man in the dark who says, in effect, that he is the one the children have been chasing this whole time. Except the bunker has trained you by now not to trust a surface. Wendy is the one who catches it. She grows suspicious after noticing that this so-called author looks identical to the mascot printed on a can of beans found in the very same room. Sit with how ordinary and how devastating that observation is. The face claiming to be a real and specific man is a copy of a picture on a bean can, an image lifted from the nearest available source, and the disguise is undone not by a weapon but by attention, by someone finally reading the room correctly the way the blacklight and the floor tiles always demanded. The most frightening thing in the bunker gave itself away by being unoriginal. What she has actually seen through is a creature called the Shapeshifter, and once exposed it attacks, trying to take Journal 3 from Dipper. This is where the episode's psychology becomes clear in hindsight. Every layer of dread the bunker built, the fear of a watcher, the sense that identity itself was untrustworthy down here, the recurring lesson that surfaces lie, all of it was preparing you for a monster whose entire nature is stolen appearance. The Shapeshifter is not scary because it is large or strong. It is scary because it is the bunker's paranoia given a body. It is the living proof that the person standing in front of you, speaking gently, claiming to be exactly who you hope to find, can be a hollow copy wearing a borrowed face. And the show makes that idea literal in the fight. Because during the struggle, the Shapeshifter cycles through multiple monster forms, each one copied from a creature documented in the journal itself. There is a grim elegance to that. The book the children carried into the bunker as a guide becomes the catalog the monster draws its shapes from. as though it has read the same pages and turned that knowledge into a wardrobe of threats. The journal that revealed the hidden map now supplies the horror with its faces. In a room where every secret opened onto another secret, the final creature is the same principle taken to its limit. A thing with no fixed self at all, only an endless series of borrowed ones, changing faster than the eye can settle. The bunker asked, from its first invisible line of ink, whether you could tell what was truly there. The shapeshifter is the answer to that question, and the answer is that you almost could not. The puppet, in Gravity Falls, is usually a joke. A sock over a hand, a painted face, something a child moves and speaks for. This chapter of the show takes that harmless object and turns it into the exact shape of a nightmare, and it does so quietly, through a favor and a handshake. It begins with Mabel, who meets a local puppeteer named Gabe Benson at a library puppet show about literacy, and decides on the spot that she will impress him. Her method is to stage a sock puppet rock opera of her own. She titles it Glove Story, a Sock Opera, and she throws herself into it with the total, undefended enthusiasm that is her signature. That enthusiasm matters here, because it becomes the stage on which something far darker performs. While Mabel builds her show, Dipper is chasing something else. He wants the secrets the journal keeps hinting at, and his attempt to pry them loose during the run-up to the puppet show is what opens the door to the disaster. Consider the framing the episode chooses. A rock opera is a performance, a controlled illusion, bodies made to move and sing by someone standing just out of sight. And the story Dipper falls into is exactly that, a performance in which he does not know, at first, that he is the puppet. The figure who arrives to make the offer is Bill Cipher. He comes to Dipper with the one thing Dipper cannot resist, the password to the author's laptop, the machine that has been sitting locked and taunting him. Bill offers the password in exchange for a favor, and he attaches a threat that is really a piece of pressure, telling Dipper, in effect, that the laptop will wipe its own data if the password is entered wrong too many times. Think about what that does to a person who wants an answer badly. It removes the option of guessing. It closes every door except the one Bill is holding open. The trade is framed as generosity, but it is built to feel like the only path. Then comes the part that deserves to be watched slowly, because it is a small masterpiece of manipulation. Bill says he wants to possess a puppet. He points at Mabel's sock puppets, sitting there inert, and the word puppet does a great deal of quiet work. It sounds like nothing. A puppet is a toy, an object, a thing already made to be controlled, so lending one out costs nothing. And Bill lets Dipper believe that an inanimate puppet cannot actually be possessed, which sounds like a technicality, a reason the favor will not work as stated. So Dipper, trying to be clever, trying to give Bill something usable, offers his own body instead. He proposes it. That is the hinge of the whole horror. Bill never demands Dipper's body. He arranges the conversation so that Dipper volunteers it, so that the victim believes the idea was his own. The handshake, when it comes, is not a theft. It is consent, engineered, and the instant Dipper shakes on the deal, the meaning of every earlier word reveals itself. Bill takes over Dipper's physical body. Dipper's own consciousness is shoved out, pushed into the mindscape, where he exists as a powerless ghost. He can see, he can hear, he can do nothing. This is the specific fear the chapter is built on, and it is worth separating from the show's usual villainy. This is not a villain winning a battle. This is a person locked inside their own life as a spectator, watching their hands move without them. The word puppet has come all the way around. Dipper thought he was lending a toy. He has become the toy. What Bill does next is the part that lingers, and it is deliberately, pointedly cruel in a way that is not strategic at all. In control of Dipper's body, Bill abuses it for fun. He slaps himself with Dipper's hand. He falls downstairs. He smashes Dipper's arm in a drawer. He stabs the body with forks. None of this advances a plan. That is the horror of it. A body Dipper has lived in every day, has protected by reflex, has flinched to keep safe, is now being damaged casually, playfully, by something that regards it as a rental it does not intend to return. And Dipper, in the mindscape, feels the wrongness of it without feeling the pain, which is arguably worse. He watches his own physical self treated as a thing with no worth. Loss of bodily control is an abstract idea until you see it staged this exactly. a person forced to witness their own flesh mistreated by a tenant who finds the mistreatment amusing. There is one thread of resistance, and it grows, fittingly, out of Mabel's harmless little show. Trapped as a disembodied spirit, Dipper finds that he can reach the material world through a puppet. During the sock opera's intermission, he possesses a sock puppet made in his own likeness, one built for the production, and through it he manages to communicate with Mabel. Notice the symmetry the episode has carefully assembled. Bill turned Dipper into a puppet by taking his body. Now Dipper, to survive, must literally become a puppet to be heard at all. The thing Mabel made to charm a boy at a library becomes the only channel a trapped soul has to warn his sister. The framing device and the crisis have folded into each other. A rock opera about socks is now the stage where a real fight over a real body is being waged, and only one person in the audience of Mabel's mind can be told the truth. The stakes turn out to be as final as they can be. Bill's actual plan is not simply to borrow Dipper's body and enjoy the vandalism. He means to end it. The plan is revealed in a note he leaves for Mabel, and the note lays out the intention plainly, that he will throw Dipper's stolen body off the water tower. The body dies, and because Dipper's consciousness is already in the mindscape, with no flesh left to return to, he would be trapped there forever. Sit with the completeness of that. It is not a defeat that can be recovered from later. It is designed to be permanent, a person deleted from their own existence while their killer wears their face. The handshake Dipper offered, thinking he was clever, was a signature on that outcome. What makes the chapter frightening rather than merely sad is how ordinary the mechanism is. There is no curse, no ancient artifact, no dramatic ritual. There is a boy who wants an answer, a deal that sounds fair, a word that sounds innocent, and a moment of trying to be helpful. Bill does not overpower Dipper. He reads him, offers him a shape to fit himself into, and lets Dipper walk in. Possession, as this show stages it, is not a monster breaking down a door. It is being talked into opening it, and then discovering, too late, that the room on the other side is your own body, and you are no longer allowed inside. There is an episode in the second season that does not look like the rest of the series, and that difference is the point. It abandons the single continuous story and breaks itself into 3 separate framed tales, each one a small horror in miniature, stitched together the way an old anthology film stitches its segments. The series had always borrowed from horror faintly in its margins. Here it stops borrowing and simply becomes the thing 3 times over, and the effect is a show wearing a mask of an older, darker format and inviting you to notice the seams. The first of these tales concerns Stan and a watch. He steals a fake gold watch from an old witch at a swap meet, and the theft is petty enough that you almost expect nothing to come of it. Something comes of it. The witch curses him, and the curse works with the patient cruelty of a fairy tale, which is to say it waits until morning. Stan wakes the next day with both hands completely missing. Consider what that image is doing before the story explains it. A man reaching for the world and finding that the part of him that reaches is simply gone, erased in the night, the body suddenly a stranger to itself. The trail back to the witch is almost mundane in its cleverness. Dipper, Mabel, and Stan find her secret hideout, a cave in the mountains, using nothing more supernatural than a pamphlet picked up at that same swap meet. There is something faintly funny and faintly unsettling about a witch who advertises, who leaves paper trails at a flea market, and the segment lets that tension sit. Then they arrive, and the cave answers them. It is populated by disembodied, animate hands, hands that move on their own, and these hands attack the 3 of them the moment they enter. Think about the horror logic underneath that. Stan lost his hands, and here is a room full of hands that belong to no one, living their own lives, turned against the people who came looking. The severed part becomes its own creature. The thing that was taken from you is not destroyed. It is simply somewhere else, and it has learned to move. The resolution of the curse is where the segment reveals its real nature, which is comic and a little sad rather than truly frightening. The witch tells them the curse can only be broken by a kiss on the lips. Stan cannot do it. He loses his nerve at the last moment and kisses her hand instead, and the substitution fails, because a curse is a contract, and he tried to pay it in the wrong currency. And then the witch confesses the whole shape of the thing. The hand-stealing curse, she admits, is a recurring scheme, a plan she runs again and again for the simple purpose of getting herself a date. It always ends in failure. That confession turns the horror inside out. The monster is lonely. The elaborate supernatural machinery, the missing hands, the cave full of crawling fingers. All of it is the apparatus of someone who cannot find an ordinary way to be wanted, and who has failed at it so many times that failure is now built into the ritual. The horror homage lets the segment say something it could not say plainly. Under the mask of the witch is a very human ache. The second tale changes register entirely, and that shift is part of how the anthology works, refusing to let you settle. This one belongs to Waddles, Mabel's pig. Dipper finds a mushroom, called a percepshroom, and Waddles eats it, and the pig becomes super intelligent. The premise sounds like a joke, and for a while it plays like one, but the ending is where it turns thoughtful. Waddles gives up the intelligence. He does it voluntarily, and his reason is precise and softly devastating. The pursuit of knowledge, he finds, leaves him no time to spend with Mabel, so he chooses to become ordinary again. There is a version of this story that is triumphant, the creature ascending toward genius. This is the opposite. It is a mind looking clearly at everything it could have and deciding that understanding the universe is a poorer thing than sitting beside the person who loves you. The uncanny here is gentle. It is the horror, if you can call it that, of seeing your own pet look back at you with full comprehension, and then of watching it decide that comprehension was not worth the cost. The third and final tale returns to fear as its subject directly, and it is the most self-aware of the three. Stan takes the family to the house of a claymation director named Harry Claymore, and the stated reason is to help Mabel confront her fear of stop-motion animation. That premise is doing something sly. Stop-motion is a technique built on the uncanny already, on objects that should be inert and are instead made to move one frame at a time, on the illusion of life poured into things that are not alive. Mabel is afraid of the medium itself, and the episode decides to make the medium literal. Claymore's house is inhabited by living clay. A clay cyclops moves through it, and clay skeletons move with it, and they attack the Pines family. The thing she feared as an image steps off the screen and reaches for her. This is the uncanny in its clearest form. The sensation that arrives when something inanimate behaves as though it were alive. A clay skeleton is a double of a real thing, a copy of bone shaped by hand, and when it walks it becomes a body that is only pretending to be a body. That gap between the shape of a living thing and the absence of anything living inside it is exactly the discomfort that stop motion has always traded on, the reason a certain kind of viewer finds it more disturbing than smooth animation. The episode takes Mabel's private fear and builds the whole segment out of the very grammar of the fear. To confront it, she must be attacked by the thing that frightens her, rendered in the technique that frightens her, inside the house of the man who makes it. What holds these three tales together is not a plot, because there is no shared plot. What holds them together is a shape. Each one takes something familiar and gives it an unnatural second life. A stolen watch becomes a curse, and the curse turns hands into independent creatures. A mushroom turns a pet into a thinker, and then the thinker chooses to unmake himself. A child's fear of a filmmaking technique becomes a house full of clay that walks. In each case, something that should stay in its place, a body part, an animal's mind, an inanimate figure, breaks its boundary and comes toward you. That is the oldest engine of horror, the boundary that will not hold, and the episode runs it 3 times in 3 keys. Comic and tender and frightening in turn, and it is worth sitting at the end with how strange it is that a show for children reached so deliberately for the anthology form, the format of late-night horror television and grim little films, and did it not as parody but as genuine homage. The mask fits. The witch who curses out of loneliness, the pig who surrenders his genius for love, the clay that answers a girl's fear in the exact shape of that fear. These are not the material of a simple monster of the week. They are 3 small meditations on the uncanny, on the doubles and copies and severed pieces that take on lives of their own, delivered under cover of a format built to make you comfortable with being afraid. You can drift here in the quiet between the 3 tales and let them stay separate because they were built to be entered one at a time. The Society of the Blind Eye was founded in 1982, and its origin is stranger and sadder than the word society suggests. We tend to imagine cults as things people are recruited into, structures built to trap the vulnerable and drain them. This one begins with a single man trying to save himself. Fiddleford McGucket, the man the town would later know only as Old Man McGucket, built a machine capable of reaching into a human mind and taking a memory out. He did not build it to control anyone. He built it, at first, to erase what he himself had seen. Consider what has to happen to a person before erasing their own memory feels like mercy. McGucket had been a lab assistant, and the man he assisted was Stanford Pines, working on a machine meant to open a door between dimensions. During one of the portal's early activations, something went wrong. McGucket was pulled partway inside along with a test dummy, and for a moment he glimpsed whatever waits on the other side before Ford reached in and pulled him back out. The show does not linger on what he saw. It does not need to. Everything that follows is the shape of that glimpse pressed into a human life, because after that moment, McGucket is not the same. He begs Ford to abandon the project. He quits as his assistant, and then paranoia sets in and insomnia, the two of them feeding each other in that particular loop where the mind cannot rest and cannot trust the rest even when it comes. He has seen something he cannot unsee, and there is no procedure for that, no counsel, no one who would believe the description. So he engineers one. He turns his own genius, the same intelligence that helped build the door, toward building a way to shut a specific room inside his own head. The memory gun is the invention of a man who has decided that forgetting is the only cure available to him. And here is the quiet horror the episode understands better than it lets on. It works. The gun does exactly what he asks. He points it at himself, and the memory goes. And for a while there is relief. But the thing about erasing a memory of something that frightened you is that the fear does not always leave with the memory. Sometimes only the explanation leaves, and you are left frightened of nothing you can name, which is worse. So he uses it again and again. Over years, McGucket erases so much of himself that decades simply vanish. The disheveled, senile old man who wanders the later series, the one played for a certain kind of comedy, the town eccentric who seems never to have had a mind worth losing, is in fact a man who had a magnificent mind and dismantled it deliberately, one extraction at a time. Every use of the gun took a little more than he intended. This is the body horror at the center of the whole idea. And notice that it is not gore. It is subtraction. It is a person becoming less of himself while still walking around wearing the outline of who he was. Now think about how the children come to this. Dipper and Mabel are investigating the authorship of the journal that has guided the entire summer, Journal 3, and they find a chip stamped with the words McGucket Labs. The clue points cleanly at the old man. It seems, for a stretch of the episode, that this ruined figure is the author of the book that holds all the town's secrets, and that would be a satisfying story on its own, the fallen genius who wrote the map to Gravity Falls. But it is wrong. The chip is a fragment of a partnership. Stanford Pines was the author. McGucket was only his lab assistant. The clue that seemed to reveal the mind behind the mystery instead reveals the man who helped and then paid for it. That misdirection is doing something careful. For a while, the show lets you believe the broken man was the genius, and only later corrects you toward the truth, which is that he became broken in service of another man's genius. The disturbing reveal about Ford's past is not that he was cruel, it is that his ambition had a cost, and the cost was assigned to someone else, and that someone spent the rest of the series being laughed at by a town that had no idea what it was looking at. The headquarters gives all of this a physical form. The Society of the Blind Eye keeps its secret beneath the Gravity Falls Museum of History, which is a fitting place to hide a machine that unmakes history in individual minds. You reach it through a fireplace. There is a hidden button carved in the shape of a stone eye, and when it is pressed, the door behind the fireplace opens. Then a red curtain, marked with the Society's eye symbol, covers the entrance to the main hall. Every threshold here is about seeing and not seeing. An eye you press to open a door. A curtain you pull aside to enter a place devoted to blindness. The symbol of the group is an eye crossed out, and the deeper you go, the more literal that becomes. Inside, Dipper and Mabel and Soos watch the machine used the way McGucket never quite intended it, on other people, by hooded members who have made his private cure into a communal practice. Their subject is the waitress, Lazy Susan. She had an encounter with a gnome, a small strange thing she was not meant to remember, and the Society takes it from her. The The gun does its work, the memory leaves her, and then comes the detail that makes the whole operation feel industrial rather than magical. The extracted memory travels through a pneumatic tube into a storage chamber. It is not destroyed. It is filed. That image is the coldest thing in the episode. A memory pulled out of a living woman and sent whistling down a tube like an order at a bank into a room where such things are kept. The society does not merely erase. It collects. Somewhere beneath the museum there is an archive of everything the town was not allowed to hold on to. A library of stolen moments belonging to people who no longer know they are missing anything. Lazy Susan will go back to work having lost nothing she can feel and something she can never recover, and the record of it sits in a chamber under her feet. What began as one man's desperate attempt to quiet his own mind has become a machine for managing an entire town's sense of reality. The horror moves outward in stages, from Ford's ambition, to McGucket's ruin, to the hooded ritual, to the filed memories of ordinary people who came to the museum and left lighter than they arrived. And the cult logic underneath it is almost reasonable, which is why it unsettles. Gravity Falls is a dangerous place. People see things that break them. The society offers the same solution McGucket found for himself, applied at scale, without consent. Forget, and you will be able to keep living here. Forget, and the town can go on pretending it is ordinary. The tragedy is that we already know where that road ends, because we have already met the man at the end of it. Old Man McGucket is the proof of the cure. He is what happens when you take the society's promise all the way to its conclusion. When you remove enough of yourself to escape the fear and remove yourself along with it. The town laughs at him. The town does not understand that he is the most honest thing the Blind Eye Society ever produced. A living answer to the question of what it costs to unsee the things this place shows you. Some horror does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a monster or a scream. It arrives instead as a number ticking down in a dark room, and the certainty that whatever the number reaches, no one above ground can stop it. Chapter 9 belongs to that kind of horror. The family reveal, the question of who Stan really is and what he has hidden beneath the gift shop, has been told and retold, and this channel has circled it before. Set that aside for a moment. Watch the episode instead as a slow tightening, a countdown that begins in a basement and does not care who is asleep upstairs. It begins with Stan and the drums. He powers the great machine with barrels of chemical waste, and when the danger of that choice is raised, he makes it plain, in effect, that he does not care how dangerous it is. Think about what that sentence contains. Not recklessness for its own sake, but a man who has already weighed the cost and decided the cost is acceptable, whatever it turns out to be. He is not gambling, he is paying. And then he does something small and quiet and, in retrospect, deeply unsettling. He sets a countdown timer on the machine, and he sinks a matching timer onto his own wrist. The clock is not only in the basement now, he carries it on his body. Wherever he goes for the rest of this day, the number goes with him. That number is 18 hours. 18 hours before the portal fully activates. Hold that figure in your mind as the episode unfolds above ground, because everything that happens in daylight is happening inside that window. Every ordinary moment, every gesture of warmth, is time being spent. The genius of the structure is that the countdown is invisible to almost everyone in it. The twins do not know it exists. The town does not know. Only Stan knows, and he knows it to the minute, strapped to his arm. He learns something else in the basement, and it is worth sitting with. Reading the first journal, Stan discovers that a side effect of activating the machine is temporary gravity anomalies. Consider how that reframes the horror. The threat is not confined to the room where the machine sits. It leaks outward into the physical world, into the ground itself, into the rules that hold objects down. A portal is an abstract thing, easy to keep at a distance. Gravity is not. Gravity is the most basic promise the world makes to you, that down stays down, and the machine in the basement is steadily withdrawing that promise. The dread here is not that a door will open. It is that the floor is no longer entirely trustworthy. And then the show does what good slow-burn horror always does. It goes bright. Mabel wakes Dipper to show him a closet full of fireworks, and Stan takes the twins up onto the roof of the mystery shack to set them off. On its surface, this is joy. A grandfather figure and two children, light in the sky. The kind of scene a family video would end on. But you are watching it with the wrist timer in mind, and so the sweetness curdles into something closer to a wake. This is a man spending his remaining hours. The fireworks are beautiful because he has chosen for them to be beautiful, because he knows what is coming and they do not, and he wants this before it arrives. It is on that roof that the episode gives you its most human and most cowardly moment at once. Stan tries to tell Dipper and Mabel the truth about his secret. He begins, and he stops himself. He resolves, instead, to confess to them later that day. Notice what that decision does to the clock. He is not refusing to tell them. He is postponing it into the same shrinking window that holds the countdown, betting that there will be a better hour, a calmer moment, a version of this conversation that hurts less. The tragedy of a countdown is that it does not grant better moments. It only subtracts. Every hour he saves the truth for is an hour closer to the truth arriving on its own terms. Those terms arrive without warning. A heavily armored tactical operator tackles Stan on the roof, in the middle of the fireworks, in the middle of the postponed confession. At the same moment, Agent Trigger signals the rest of the team to secure the mystery shack. The intrusion is total, and it is fast. One breath, the family is on the roof, the next, the roof is a scene, and armed strangers are taking the building. What makes it land as horror, rather than as action, is the timing. It lands inside the pause. Stan had just decided to wait, and the waiting is what betrays him, because the world does not observe his schedule. For Dipper, the shock is doubled, and this is where the episode reaches back into its own history and uses it against him. He is stunned to see Agents Powers and Trigger alive and standing at the shack, because he had believed both of them dead, killed by the undead in an earlier episode. To Dipper, these two are ghosts. Men he watched be overtaken by a horde of zombies, now upright and armored and in command on his roof. There is a specific vertigo in seeing the dead return not as monsters, but as authority, wearing badges, giving orders, entirely certain of themselves. The paranoia of this chapter is not only about the machine below. It is about a world in which the things you were sure of, including who is dead, stubbornly refuse to stay settled. Powers gives the raid its justification. He accuses Stan of stealing 300 gallons of hazardous waste from a government facility. And here the two threads of the chapter touch without the agents ever knowing it. The audience has watched those barrels feed the machine. The audience knows the waste is not a crime being investigated, but a fuel already burning, already counting down. To Powers, this is a theft. To the viewer, it is a fuse. Two men stand on a roof arguing about a number of gallons, and neither of them is the one who understands what that number is doing to the ground beneath the town. When Dipper presses the question that has haunted him, asking how the agents survived the zombie horde from the earlier episode, Powers answers with a chill that the episode plays almost as a throwaway. He claims, in effect, that he used Trigger as a human shield. Let that sit. It is delivered lightly, and it is monstrous. The man in charge of securing this house, the voice of legitimate government authority in this scene, survived by feeding his partner to the dead. It is a small line, but it tells you exactly how much trust the world of this episode deserves. The people arriving to restore order are not clean. They are simply the ones who lived, and they lived by a logic no better than Stan's, perhaps worse, because they wear the costume of the good guys while they do it. Meanwhile, the ground continues to answer the basement. Old Man McGucket is shown packing a bag, and into that bag, among his things, goes a raccoon. He is trying to flee the town as the gravity quakes grow stronger. Set aside how funny the raccoon is, because the comedy is doing serious work. McGucket is the one man in Gravity Falls who reacts to the anomalies correctly. Everyone else is on the roof or securing the house or arguing about gallons. He alone feels the world shifting under his feet and does the sane thing, which is to run. That a figure the town treats as its resident madman is the only one packing to escape is the episode telling you, without fuss, who has been paying attention. The quakes are not background. They are the countdown made physical, growing stronger by the hour, and he can feel each one. The chapter closes its case against Stan the way the whole episode has worked, by making you look twice. Dipper and Mabel review the security footage from the shack. At first, the footage seems to clear him. There is a version of events in which he did not take the barrels, in which the accusation is a mistake, in which the man they love is exactly what he appears to be. And then a second angle plays. The second angle shows him stealing the barrels. Same night, same camera system, a different vantage, and the truth is the opposite of the first read. This is the paranoiac's nightmare rendered as a plot device. Evidence is not stable. What you saw depended entirely on where the camera stood, and a slight change of position turns innocence into guilt. The twins wanted the footage to save him. It convicts him instead, and it does so by simply looking again from another side. That is the shape of Chapter 9 when you refuse the family drama and watch the dread instead. A timer on a wrist. A promise withdrawn from the ground. A confession postponed into a window that is already closing. Dead men returning as authority, admitting they survived by sacrifice. A madman packing to run while everyone sane stays put. And a truth that changes depending on the angle you view it from. 18 hours, spent one bright and terrible moment at a time, with the number ticking down the whole while, unseen by nearly everyone it is about to reach. There is a moment, near the very end of Gravity Falls, when the show stops being a mystery about the strange and becomes a portrait of the strange having won. In the episode that opens the finale sequence, Bill Cipher gains a physical form in the real world, and he does not creep into the town so much as announce himself over it. He declares himself the new ruler of Gravity Falls. Consider what a strange sentence that is for a children's cartoon to mean literally. Not a threat, not a plan. A stated fact. The dream has a body now, and the body has an address. The address is the pyramid. Bill summons a massive black pyramid up from the ground to serve as his fortress, and the geometry of it matters more than its size. A pyramid is the oldest shape we build to house the dead and to point at the sky, and here it rises inverted in purpose. A tomb turned into a throne, planted over an ordinary logging town like a tent stake driven through the middle of the world. Everything beneath it is now interior. The sky itself has been annexed. When you look up from the streets of Gravity Falls in this episode, you are looking at the underside of something that intends to stay. He does not arrive alone. Bill brings his own gang of interdimensional demons in with him, and the show gives them names the way you might name the cast of a nightmare you keep having. There is 8-Ball and Cryptos, there is Amorphous Shape, there is Teeth, there is Pachyfire, and there is Piranha. Say those names slowly and notice how little they resemble each other. One is a number, one is a texture, one is simply the fact of having teeth, one carries an infant's soothing object turned into a weapon. They do not share a design language because they were never meant to belong to one world. That is the horror of the ensemble. They are a collection of loose ideas from separate bad places, and now they are standing in a town square that used to have a diner and a water tower. Then comes the wave. A pink weirdness wave sweeps across Gravity Falls, and it transforms people, animals, and objects into bizarre forms as it passes. Watch how the episode frames it as weather. Not an attack aimed at anyone in particular, but a front moving through, the way a cold snap moves through, indifferent and total. What it touches, it rewrites. And the strangest mercy the episode grants here is to refuse to make it loud. The wave reaches Soos's grandmother, and she is turned into a chair. She does not scream. She calmly accepts her new form, and she tells Soos to go and help others. Stay inside that image because it is the emotional center of the whole apocalypse, and it is played almost as a lullaby. A grandmother becomes furniture. Furniture is what waits in a house. It holds weight. It asks for nothing. Her acceptance is not defeat. It is the last purely loving act available to a person who has just been emptied of most of what a person is, and she spends it telling the boy she raised to leave her behind and be useful. The body horror here is not the transformation. It is that she is still herself inside it, and being herself means letting go. Elsewhere, the arithmetic is colder. Bill's forces turn many of the townspeople into golden statues, and swarms of eye-bats descend to abduct the ones who are not frozen. Think about the two fates side by side. To be turned to gold is to be made beautiful and permanent and completely gone. A monument to yourself standing where you happen to be standing. To be carried off by the eye-bats is to become cargo, lifted out of the story entirely. The town is being sorted. Some residents become decoration, some become inventory, and the streets between them grow emptier by the second. A recent look at this channel walked through the villains who eventually got what they deserved, but here In this hour, deserving has nothing to do with anything. The wave does not check who you were. Not everyone is merely a victim of the weather, though. Preston Northwest. A man who has spent his life buying his way out of consequence tries to do it one more time and offers to ally himself with Bill. The response is one of the cruelest images the show ever animates. Bill rearranges all the holes on Preston's face, and he does it in front of his family. The eyes, the nostrils, the mouth, shuffled like tiles. Understand what is being punished. Not Preston's wealth exactly, but his belief that he could negotiate with the thing that eats worlds, that his usual currency would work on a creature made of pure appetite. The disfigurement is grotesque, but the placement of it, in front of the wife and daughter he has always performed for, is the real blade. His face was his instrument of status. Bill takes the instrument and makes it a joke, and makes the family watch. Against all of this, the resistance in this particular episode is almost unbearably small. Stanford Pines, the man who understands Bill better than anyone alive, climbs a church bell tower with the quantum destabilizer, a weapon capable of erasing Bill from existence. He takes aim. This is the shot the entire war might turn on. One man, one clean line of sight, the smartest person in town holding the one thing that could end it. And a possessed bell startles him. The tower's own bell, turned against him by the weirdness, jolts his arm at the instant he fires, and the shot goes wide. He hits Bill's hat and nothing else. The hat. Of all the things to miss by, he misses by a hat, an accessory, a floating piece of costume on a being who does not need clothing and wears it as a taunt. There is something almost literary in how small the margin is, and how meaningless the thing he strikes turns out to be. The universe here is not merely hostile. It is petty. It has arranged for the church, the one building that traditionally stands against the demonic, to sabotage the shot with its own bell. Ford does everything right, and reality itself flinches his hand at the last second, and the great weapon accomplishes nothing but knocking a triangle's cap askew. That is the state of Gravity Falls at the close of this chapter. A black pyramid over the town, a grandmother sitting patiently as a chair, gold where neighbors used to be, a rich man remade into a warning, and the one perfect shot spoiled by a bell. The weird did not sneak in through a crack in the world this time. It walked through the front door, gave itself a title, and began, calmly and thoroughly, to redecorate. Consider what a prison actually is. Most stories imagine it as walls and bars, something imposed from outside by a jailer who wants you kept. But the cruelest cage in all of Gravity Falls is one the prisoner helped build. During Weirdmageddon, in the 19th episode of the second season, Mabel is trapped inside what the series calls a prison bubble, and the crucial, deeply unsettling detail is that this bubble was formed jointly by Mabel's own mind and Bill Cipher's power. Bill supplied the force. Mabel supplied the shape. The horror here is not that a monster locked her away. The horror is that some part of her agreed to be locked away, and made the lock beautiful. Dipper, Wendy, and Soos go in after her, and what they find is not a dungeon. They find Mabeland. It is a hyper-bright, saturated paradise that Mabel has mentally constructed, and every surface of it is designed to soothe. There are rainbows. There are cute creatures and stuffed animals given breath and motion. There is music styled after the 1980s, warm and looping and endless. Think about what it means that a prison would present itself this way, as the exact opposite of everything a prison is supposed to feel like. A wall of iron tells you plainly that you are trapped. A wall of rainbows tells you that you would be a fool to leave. The place even has citizens. Mabeland is populated in part by Zyler and Kraz, two characters from Mabel's favorite fictional television show, and inside the bubble they are no longer fictional. They exist there as real inhabitants, walking and talking residents of a fantasy that has decided to treat itself as fact. There is something tender and something disquieting in that at once. Mabel has loved these figures so completely that her mind has granted them citizenship, promoted them out of a screen and into a world, and they, in turn, become the guides who explain the rules of the place, which is where the softness of Mabeland shows its teeth. They tell the group that Mabeland has no rules at all, except for one. It is unspoken, and it is absolute. Nobody is ever allowed to mention reality. Sit with the elegance of that single prohibition. A paradise with total freedom. Freedom to do anything, be anything, want anything, provided you never once acknowledge that a truer and harder world exists just outside the color. That is the mechanism of every comforting lie a person tells themselves in grief or fear. The lie does not need to forbid much. It only needs to forbid the one sentence that would end it. Reality is not banned because it is dangerous to the citizens. It is banned because it is dangerous to the dream. And Dipper, being Dipper, keeps speaking the forbidden sentence anyway. He tries repeatedly to convince Mabel to abandon Mabeland and come back to the real world, the one where their family is scattered and a triangle rules the sky. Mabel refuses, and her refusal is not stupid, which is what makes this chapter so heavy. She argues in effect that everyone is genuinely happier inside the fantasy, and she urges Dipper to stop fighting it and simply embrace it with the rest of them. She is not deluded about the offer. She understands it exactly. The offer is peace in exchange for truth, and she has looked at the wreckage of the real world and decided the trade is fair. This is the darkest hinge of the whole story, the moment where losing hope does not look like despair. It looks like contentment. It looks like a person who has stopped struggling and started decorating. What the episode understands, and states through its own machinery rather than through a speech, is that this kind of peace cannot hold. It is built on a suppression, and suppression costs energy, and eventually the energy runs out. When Mabel finally loses her grip on the fantasy, Mabeland does not simply switch off. It curdles. The cheerful inhabitants, the cute creatures Mabel dreamed up to keep herself company, melt and transform into monstrous versions of themselves and turn on the group. The paradise becomes a hunting ground, and the very softness that had been so inviting is revealed as a thin skin over something with a mouth. This is the true face of the eyeball and bat horror that Bill spreads across this whole arc. The recognition that anything sweet enough to lower your defenses can be inverted into something that feeds on you. The monsters were never brought in from outside. They were the paradise, all along, wearing a friendlier shape. Only two figures do not turn. Xyler and Kraz, the imported heroes of Mabel's favorite show, remain themselves while everything else around them dissolves into teeth. It is a small mercy and worth pausing on. Whatever else Mabel's fantasy was, it contained a genuine core of things she loved for the right reasons. And that core does not rot when the rest of it does. The love was real, even if the world built around it was not. That distinction, love surviving while the false comfort collapses, is the thread the escape hangs from. They flee the collapsing world by riding waddles. Mabel's ordinary pet pig, small and unremarkable in the real Gravity Falls, is enormous inside the fantasy, blown up to a giant by the logic of a place that magnifies whatever its maker cherishes. And so the thing that carries them out of the nightmare is not a weapon and not a spell. It is a creature Mabel loves, made huge by how much she loves it. The instrument of rescue is drawn from the same source as the prison. That is the quiet argument the episode is making about the interior life. The mind that can build a trap this seductive is the same mind that holds the affection strong enough to break it, and the difference between the two is only which one you let steer. The final act belongs to Mabel alone, and it is the reason this chapter is ultimately about the return of hope rather than its death. She is the one who destroys the prison bubble. She bursts it herself, from the inside with a giant knitting needle, and in doing so she ends Mabeland and every one of its inhabitants, except Xyler and Kraz. Consider how much that costs her. She built this world as shelter. She populated it, scored it, lit it, and defended its single rule against her own brother. And then she picks up a needle, a tool of making, a tool she would ordinarily use to knit something warm, and she turns it into a tool of unmaking and pops the beautiful lie with her own hand. Bill's power helped form the cage, but Bill does not get to open it. Only the person who agreed to be caged can withdraw that agreement, and she does. Above all of this, patrolling the ruined town outside the bubble are Bill's aerial sentries. The giant eye bats are eyeball-shaped creatures with yellow irises and bat-like wings, and they are larger and more hostile than the smaller eye bats that Ford had encountered earlier in the story. They drift over Gravity Falls as living surveillance, eyes that fly, a sky that watches. It is worth holding that image against everything Mabel has just done inside her bubble. The outer world is a place of pure watching, where a great eye enforces its order by seeing everything and offering nothing. The inner world was a place of pure not seeing, a paradise whose only law was to refuse to look at the truth. Mabel, in the end, chooses neither the tyranny of the eye nor the blindness of the dream. She chooses to look at the real ruin, needle in hand, and to walk back out into it awake. Consider what it means that the show saves its most literal monster for last. For a season and a half, Bill Cipher has been a flat yellow triangle, a shape a child could draw, a thing that floats and jokes and never quite touches the world. Then, in the final episode of Season 2, inside the structure called the pyramid, he stops being a symbol and becomes a body. He takes the form of a colossal red pyramid, tiered like a wedding cake built for something that hates weddings. And out of it come 8 glowing limbs that move like a spider's legs. Teeth erupt where teeth should not be, tongues too. And set into all of it, a single black eye holding a yellow pupil shaped like a lizard's. This is the payoff of every earlier fear the show ever planted, the moment the abstract dread finally grows a mouth. Think about the design choice underneath that. Every frightening thing Gravity Falls did before this, the gnomes made of animals, the shapeshifter wearing your face, the wax figures that bleed, worked because the horror stayed partly hidden, suggested more than shown. Bill's final form abandons suggestion entirely. It gives you everything at once, the eye and the legs and the mouths, because at this point in the story, concealment is no longer the tool. The mask is off, the deal has curdled, and what is left is simply the thing as it always was underneath the tidy geometry. The colossal red pyramid is honest in a way the yellow triangle never allowed itself to be. While that shape looms over Dipper and Mabel, the man who once trusted it is chained inside a private study at the very top of the pyramid. Ford Pines, the genius who spent 30 years preparing to stop this exact creature, sits captive while Bill plays a piano and boasts. He says, in effect, that his new power lets him control all space, all matter, and all time. Consider the cruelty of the staging. Ford is not being tortured. He is being made to listen to music. Bill's victory is casual enough to have a soundtrack, and the instrument he chooses is a startlingly domestic, civilized one, which makes the boast land colder than any threat could. Then Bill tells Ford where he comes from. He says he originally came from a place he calls the second dimension, a region he destroyed, and that he intends to do the same to this one. This is the piece that reframes everything. The deal Ford accepted years ago, the partnership he thought was scientific collaboration, was never an offer at all. It was a pattern. Bill has done this before to a whole dimension, and the friendship, the muse, the flattery were the same approach he must have used the last time. Ford was not chosen for his brilliance. He was chosen the way the second dimension was chosen, as a door. That is the trap inside the deal, and it was set long before Ford was born. But Ford is still Ford, and captivity does not stop him thinking. On the floor of that study, or wherever he can reach it, he spray paints a wheel of 10 symbols, the zodiac, and reveals that it holds the way to defeat Bill. The method is almost absurdly human. 10 specific townspeople each stand on their own symbol and hold hands, and the circle they complete does what all of Ford's machines could not. Notice that the weapon against the space and time-controlling monster is a ring of people touching. The 10 symbols belong to Dipper, the pine tree, and Mabel, the shooting star, and Ford himself, the 6-fingered hand, and Soos, the question mark, and then Stan, Wendy, McGucket, Gideon, Robbie, and Pacifica. Enemies and children and a former villain arranged in one circle. The show's answer to cosmic power is cooperation among people who mostly do not like each other. And that, precisely, is why it fails the first time. The circle depends on unity, and the 2 people least capable of it are the Pines brothers. When they try to activate the Zodiac, Stan and Ford argue, and the argument breaks the circle before the ritual can finish. The very thing the weapon requires, hands held and held steady, is broken by the oldest grudge in the family. Bill finds them. Think about how carefully the story engineered this. It built a machine that only works if these 2 men set aside a resentment the whole series has been documenting, and then it let the resentment win at the worst possible moment. The failure is not a plot accident. It is character, made lethal. So the brothers stop trying to be a team and become something more like a magic trick. Stan and Ford secretly swap clothes and impersonate each other. When Bill comes to take the safe combination he needs, he possesses the one he believes is Ford, but the man in Ford's clothes is Stan. Bill walks into the wrong mind, confident he has entered the scientist, and finds instead the con man, the brother everyone underestimated, including Bill. The whole finale turns on the fact that a demon who claims to control all space, matter, and time cannot tell two twins apart once they trade sweaters. Then comes the finish, and it is quiet in a way the rest of the episode is not. Ford fires the memory erasing gun into Stan's mind. Into the mind, Bill is now trapped inside to destroy the creature from within. He can do this to Stan and not to himself, for reasons the story had already set in place long before this moment. So the plan only works on Stan. Sit with the shape of that. To kill the thing that came to erase this dimension, someone has to have his memories erased, and it cannot be the genius, because he is protected. It has to be the brother who agreed to be mistaken for him. The memory gun, which the series introduced as a tool of cowardice and cover-up, becomes the instrument that ends the monster. And it works only because Stan let himself be walked into, wearing the wrong clothes, so that Bill would be standing inside the one mind it was safe to burn down. Every fear the show ever built converges here. The abstract triangle becomes a literal body of teeth and limbs. The tempting deal is revealed as an old, repeated murder of whole worlds. The saving ritual is undone by a family grudge, and then rescued by that same family's oldest instinct, which is to protect each other by trickery. And the weapon of forgetting, feared through the whole series, finally does something clean. What defeats the creature that controls all space, matter, and time is not greater power. It is two brothers, one metal plate, and a swapped sweater. Consider what a pitch really is. It is a promise made before the thing exists, a way of pointing at something not yet built by naming the things it will resemble. When Alex Hirsch went to sell Gravity Falls, the shorthand he reached for was a weird Twin Peaks meets The Simpsons series. He has recalled that Disney was the network he thought would be receptive to exactly that combination, and there is something telling in the choice. A family cartoon studio, and the name in his mouth was David Lynch. Long before a single frame was drawn, the series carried the fingerprint of one of the strangest things ever put on American television. That fingerprint was never meant to be a costume. Hirsch has been careful in interviews to draw a line between homage and parody. The Pacific Northwest setting, the fog and the pines and the sense that the town itself is keeping a secret, and what he has called the magical themes of the show were a deliberate design choice, an acknowledgement of his love for Twin Peaks rather than an attempt to spoof it. That distinction matters more than it might first appear. Parody borrows a thing in order to laugh at it. Acknowledgement borrows a thing because you cannot imagine your own work without it. Hirsch was doing the second. He was building a place that felt haunted in the specific way Lynch taught a generation of viewers to feel haunted, and then handing that place to two 12-year-olds and a golf cart. The debt goes deeper than atmosphere, and Hirsch has said so plainly. Following David Lynch's death, he posted a tribute on X in January of 2025, and the line he wrote was direct. The gist of it was plain, that without Lynch there would be no Twin Peaks, no X-Files, and by his own account, no Gravity Falls. Read that slowly. He is not claiming a passing influence, a favorite show among many. He is naming a route, tracing his own creation back through a chain of stranger and stranger things until it disappears into a single source. That is a rare kind of honesty for a creator to offer about his own work, and it reframes everything the show does with dread. The strangest part of that debt is a story of a phone call that did not go the way Hirsch wanted. When it came time to cast Bill Cipher, the triangular demon who becomes the series' central horror, Hirsch offered the role to David Lynch himself. Consider the symmetry there. The man who made Twin Peaks was to give voice to the villain of the very series that Twin Peaks made possible. Lynch turned it down. And so Hirsch stepped in and voiced the character himself, a performance he has publicly described as a bad impression of Lynch. The nightmare at the center of Gravity Falls is, by its creator's own account, a man doing his best and admittedly imperfect impersonation of the artist he loves most. The homage did not just shape the world, it got into the monster's throat. Some of the tributes are gentler, hidden in plain sight for anyone who knew where to look. In the series finale, the episode that returns Dipper and Mabel home to California, the bus driver who carries them back is voiced by Kyle MacLachlan, the actor who played FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks. There is a soft grace to that casting. The show ends by putting its children into the hands of the man who, in the work that inspired all of this, spent his days trying to solve a mystery in a small, strange town. He does not solve anything here, he simply drives them home. But for a listener who carries the reference, the ordinary act of a bus pulling away becomes a passing of the torch, quiet and unremarked. Earlier and stranger, the show wore its influence as pure image. In the first season, in the episode called The Hand That Rocks the Mabel, Gideon takes Dipper to a secret place he calls the club, and the interior of that room is designed to visually resemble the Red Room of the Black Lodge from Twin Peaks. This has been noted widely, by critics and by the fan wikis that catalog such things. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The room is a threshold in Lynch's work, a space outside ordinary space where the rules of reality soften and something older speaks. Gravity Falls borrows that geometry and hands it to a child villain in a powder blue suit. Other recent tellings have treated Gideon's manipulations as the point of that scene. Look instead at the walls. The show is telling you, in the language of production design, exactly which lineage it belongs to. What emerges, when you gather these things together, is a portrait of horror as inheritance. The setting, the villain's voice, the casting of a beloved detective, a room built to echo another room. None of it is accident, and Hirsch has spent years saying as much. The scariest imagery in Gravity Falls did not arrive from nowhere. It came down a line, from an artist who taught a young creator that a small town could hold an infinite darkness, and that the darkness could be beautiful. Hirsch received that, and he passed it on, badly and lovingly, in his own bad impression of the master. Consider what it means for a children's cartoon to end every single episode with a puzzle. Not a joke, not a teaser for next week, but a genuine cryptogram, a short string of scrambled letters hidden in the end credits, waiting to be solved by anyone patient enough to pause the screen. Gravity Falls does exactly this, and it does it with a discipline that most adult media never attempts. Every episode conceals one of these codes, and the trick is that the method of encoding changes as the series moves forward. The show does not simply hide a message. It teaches you, slowly, how to become the kind of person who can find one. The early episodes begin gently. For the first 6 episodes, the credits codes use what is called a Caesar cipher, shifted 3 letters back, which is one of the oldest and simplest forms of concealment known to writing. You take each letter and you walk it backward 3 steps through the alphabet, and the nonsense resolves into words. It is the sort of code a clever child could break with a pencil and a little stubbornness, and that seems to be the point. The show is holding out its hand. It is saying, in effect, that there is a pattern here and you are capable of learning it. Then, without fanfare, the difficulty rises. From the 7th episode through the 13th, the codes abandon the Caesar shift and switch to an @bash cipher, which mirrors the alphabet against itself so that A becomes Z, B becomes Y, and every letter is reflected across the center. That is a different kind of thinking. The Caesar cipher is a slide, a simple offset, but the @bash is a fold, and a solver who had grown comfortable with one method suddenly has to abandon it and learn another. The series does not announce this change. It simply expects you to notice that your old key no longer fits the lock. The pattern of escalation continues. Episodes 14 through 19 move to an A1Z26 cipher, a system in which each letter is replaced by its position number in the alphabet so that the message arrives as a run of numbers that must be counted back into speech. 3 different systems then across 19 episodes, each one demanding a slightly different habit of mind, each one assuming that the audience it is speaking to has been paying attention all along. Think about the confidence in that structure. A show aimed at children treats its viewers as apprentices, and it raises the bar in stages, trusting that the ones who care will climb. The Season 1 finale is where this trust reveals its full ambition. The 20th episode, the one titled Gideon Rises, does not use a single cipher at all. It layers 3 of them together, combining the A1Z26, the @bash, and the Caesar into one stacked construction, so that solving it requires unwinding each layer in turn, peeling the message backward through every method the season has taught. It is a graduation exam disguised as a credits gag. Everything the viewer has been trained on across those 20 episodes converges into one final lock that can only be opened by someone who learned all 3 keys. The reward for a season of attention is a puzzle that assumes a season of attention. When the second season arrives, the game changes shape once more. Most of Season 2's end credits codes move to a keyed Vigenre cipher, which is a genuine step up in sophistication. A Vigenre cipher does not apply one fixed shift to every letter. Instead, it uses a keyword, and each letter of the message is shifted by a different amount depending on the corresponding letter of that key, so that the same letter in the original can encode to different letters in different positions. This defeats the simplest method of code breaking, which is to count how often letters appear, because the Vigenre smears that frequency across the whole message. To solve it, you must first know or guess the keyword, and the show, characteristically, does not hand you the keyword. The apprentice has become something closer to a cryptographer. What makes all of this matter is that the codes are not decoration. They are load-bearing. The clearest proof sits inside the opening credits themselves. In the final frame, where a torn journal page flickers past bearing the string VWDQLV QRWZKD WKH VHPV. To an ordinary viewer, this is background texture, a scrap of set dressing gone in an instant. But it is the same Caesar cipher from the earliest episodes, shifted back 3 letters, and when you apply that shift, the string resolves into a plain and unsettling sentence. It reads, "Decoded, Stan is not what he seems." The central mystery of the entire series, the question the show would spend 2 seasons circling, was sitting in the title sequence from the very beginning, in full view, protected by nothing more than the first code the show ever taught. The information was never hidden from you. It was only hidden from the version of you that had not yet learned to look. This, I think, is the real engine of what happened with Gravity Falls and its audience, and it is why the show grew into something larger than a cartoon. A conventional mystery keeps its secrets in a locked drawer and reveals them on the writer's schedule. Gravity Falls scattered its secrets across the screen and dared you to reach them early. The result was a viewership that behaved less like an audience and more like a research community, comparing solutions, arguing over keywords, treating each frame as potential evidence. The codes transformed passive watching into active investigation, and an investigation, once begun, does not switch off when the episode ends. The show extended this compact beyond the screen entirely. In 2015, the tie-in book called Journal 3 arrived, and it did not simply reprint the series' lore in prose. It included a physical paper cipher wheel, an actual rotating disc bound into the object, which readers were meant to use to decode symbol-based codes printed throughout its pages. Consider what that asks of a reader. You cannot merely read this book. You must operate it, turning the wheel by hand, converting symbols into letters at your own kitchen table, doing with your fingers what the characters in the story do with theirs. The barrier between the fiction and the person holding it grows thin. You are no longer watching someone decode a mystery. You are the one decoding it. And then there is the villain who presided over all of it, the triangular figure named Bill Cipher, whose very name is the word for a code. The show's creator, Alex Hirsch, once held a question and answer session on Reddit in which he did not answer as himself. He answered in character as Bill, typing every response in capital letters, so that the replies arrived on the screen the way the character's speech arrives in the show, loud and flat and wrong. When a fan asked about his long-term plans, the reply that fans still pass around was reportedly something about bringing back MKUltra. That is a reference to a real thing. MKUltra was an actual mind control program run by the CIA across the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. A genuine chapter of history in which a government experimented on the minds of people who did not consent. Sit with the effect of that for a moment. The joke only lands if you already know what MKUltra was, which means the humor is aimed over the heads of children and directly at the adults, and the adults it reaches are not comforted. A fictional demon reaching out of a cartoon to name a real atrocity collapses the safe distance between the show and the world. It is the same move the ciphers make, only pointed the other way. The codes pull the viewer into the fiction by demanding real effort, and the AMA pushes the fiction out into reality by borrowing a real horror. Both erode the wall that is supposed to keep an animated story on its side of the screen. That erosion is why Bill Cipher earned his place among the figures people call the scariest that animation has produced. The fear does not come only from what he does inside the episodes. It comes from a character who speaks in code and is named for code. Embedded in a show that spent 2 seasons teaching its audience to decode, released alongside a book that puts a decoding tool in your hands and a creator willing to answer as the monster and point at something true. The dread is built into the architecture. You solved your way toward him, letter by letter, and by the time you understood what you were looking at, you had already done the work of letting him in. The horror of Gravity Falls was never the monster in the woods. It was the machinery underneath the pines, the sense that everything soft and warm and funny about a summer in Oregon rested on a floor that could open at any moment. Weigh what that means for a show made for children. Bill Cipher smiling as reality burns, the memory gun erasing a life with a hum, the puppets and the mailboxes and the deer teeth, the demon behind a friendly face, the town that agreed to forget. These were never separate scares. They were the same idea told again and again, that the people who love you are hiding something to keep you safe, and that safety is a kind of lie, and that growing up is learning to carry the lie yourself. The scariest episodes were the ones where the mask slipped, where a joke turned and did not turn back, where the summer showed you how short it was always going to be. And that is the quiet trick of it. A show about the end of childhood dressed as a show about ghosts so that the real fear, the one that stays after the credits, is the one you cannot fight with a spell. The credits do roll. The golf cart drives away from the shack, the water tower shrinking behind it, the two of them looking back at a town that will go on forgetting without them. The pines close over the road. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.